A single storm, a forgotten island. When Shaquille O'Neal witnessed the community's despair, he didn't just watch. He built Hope Voyager, a lifeline that would transform disaster relief forever.
The morning sun painted the horizon in brilliant shades of gold as Shaquille O'Neal stood on the deck of the Hope Voyager. His tall frame cast a long shadow across the polished wood as his eyes scanned the vast ocean before him. The gentle breeze carried the salty scent of the sea, a familiar comfort after weeks at sea. Below, the port bustled with life and energy. Hundreds of people had gathered along the dock, their faces bright with joy and relief. Children waved colorful banners while adults called out words of gratitude. The sound of their cheering carried across the water, a testament to the impact of the ship's relief mission. "Thank you, Hope Voyager," voices rang out from the crowd. "You saved our homes, our families." Shaquille smiled, remembering the challenges they'd faced to reach this moment, the late nights, the stormy seas, the countless obstacles they'd overcome. But seeing the happiness on these faces made every hardship worthwhile. A sudden movement caught his attention. A small figure darted through the crowd, quick and determined. Before anyone could react, a young boy had climbed onto the ship's boarding ramp. He stood there, grinning widely, and waved both arms enthusiastically at Shaquille. "Mr. O'Neal! Mr. O'Neal!" the boy called out, his voice carrying the pure excitement that only children can muster. "You came back, just like you promised." Shaquille couldn't help but chuckle at the boy's boldness. It reminded him of his own childhood determination, that fearless spirit that drove him to chase his dreams. He raised his hand in response, returning the wave with equal enthusiasm. The crew members nearby shared knowing looks. They'd seen their captain's soft spot for children throughout their journey. His ability to connect with people, especially the youngest victims of disasters, had become legendary among the relief workers. The morning light strengthened, casting a golden glow over the scene. It was moments like these that reminded Shaquille why they'd created the Hope Voyager. Not just to deliver supplies and aid, but to bring something more precious, the promise that no community would be forgotten in their time of need. The waves lapped gently against the ship's hull, a rhythmic sound that had become the heartbeat of their mission. As Shaquille watched the boys' continued excitement, he felt a deep sense of purpose settle over him. This was more than a ship. It was a beacon of hope for those who needed it most. The young boy rushed forward, clutching something carefully in his small hands. It was Chemo, his eyes bright with excitement and purpose. In his grasp was a piece of paper that fluttered gently in the morning breeze. "Mr. Shaq, wait," Chemo called out, his voice filled with urgency. "I made something for you." Shaquille turned, his expression softening at the sight of the boy. Chemo held up his creation, a drawing of the Hope Voyager, rendered in bright colors. The ship's distinctive shape was instantly recognizable, floating proudly on waves of blue crayon. Beneath it, in careful letters, were the words, "You are the light of our lives." "I worked all night on it," Chemo said proudly, presenting the drawing with both hands. "Do you like it?" Shaquille carefully took the artwork, his large hands making the paper seem even smaller. He stared at the simple yet powerful message, something catching in his throat. The words stirred something deep within him, a memory from long ago when he too had been a child with dreams that seemed impossible to others. "Chemo, this..." Shaquille's voice trailed off, emotion making it hard to speak. The boy's genuine gratitude touched something raw and real inside him. "The blue is for the ocean," Chemo explained eagerly, pointing at different parts of the drawing. "And see? I drew all the crew members too. That tiny dot there is me, because one day I want to work on the ship too." Before Shaquille could respond, a voice called from across the deck. "Captain." It was Laura, the ship's operations manager, her clipboard in hand. "Sorry to interrupt, but we need to review the plans for the next relief mission. The weather reports just came in. Shaquille nodded, but took another moment to look at Kimo's drawing. "This means more than you know, buddy," he said softly, carefully rolling the paper to protect it. "Thank you." Kimo beamed with pride, standing a little straighter. "Promise you'll hang it somewhere everyone can see it." "Right in the bridge," Shaquille assured him, placing a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder, "where it will remind us every day why we do this work." As Laura waited patiently nearby, Shaquille found himself caught between two worlds, the pure hope reflected in Kimo's gift and the urgent demands of their next mission. But somehow these worlds weren't separate at all. They were connected by the same thread of purpose, the same desire to bring light to dark places. "I'll see you next time we dock, okay?" Shaquille promised Kimo. The boy nodded enthusiastically, then scampered back down to rejoin his family, his mission accomplished. As Shaquille walked across the deck toward the bridge, his mind drifted back to where it all began. The memory was clear as crystal. That devastating storm, the isolated island, and the faces of people who had lost everything. Each step he took seemed to echo with the weight of that life-changing moment. The sea breeze ruffled his shirt as images flashed through his mind. The destroyed homes, the desperate families, and most of all, the eyes of children looking up at him with hope. He remembered standing there, feeling helpless, yet knowing he had to do something. That was the moment the idea of Hope Voyager was born. He paused at the ship's railing, his hand resting on the cool metal. The morning sun caught the waves, making them sparkle like scattered diamonds. Below deck, he could hear his crew preparing for their next mission, checking supplies, reviewing weather reports, planning routes. The sounds of their dedication brought a smile to his face. "Captain?" Laura's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "The team is ready for the briefing." Shaquille turned to face her, his eyes filled with renewed purpose. "You know, Laura, sometimes I think about that first day when everyone said this was impossible." She nodded, remembering the skeptics and critics who had tried to stop them. "And look at us now. We're just getting started," Shaquille said, his voice firm with conviction. "This is our journey to change the world, one mission at a time." The ocean wind picked up, carrying with it the salty scent of adventure and possibility. But mixed with the hope was a reminder. There were still countless communities waiting for help, still so many challenges ahead. Shaquille felt it in his bones, the weight of responsibility, the urgency of their mission. Standing tall against the morning sky, he took a deep breath. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but that had never stopped him before. With each wave that lapped against the ship's hull, he felt more certain that this was exactly where he needed to be. "Let's get to that briefing," he said, striding toward the bridge with renewed energy. "There are more people out there who need us." What started as a perfect vacation turned into something no one expected. Shaquille and his friends had chosen a small island resort for their annual getaway, looking forward to days of sunshine and relaxation. But nature had other plans. The storm hit without warning. The wind howled through the night, shaking the resort buildings to their foundations. Shaquille and his friends huddled in their rooms, listening to the fury outside. By morning, they found themselves stranded. The boats damaged, communications down, and no way to leave the island. "I'd never seen anything like this," Mark, one of his friends, whispered as they stepped outside. The sight that greeted them was devastating. Palm trees lay scattered like fallen soldiers, their roots torn from the earth. Houses that had stood proudly the day before were now reduced to piles of broken wood and metal. The pristine beaches were littered with debris, and the crystal-clear waters they had admired yesterday were now dark and angry. But it was the people who struck Shaquille the hardest. Local families wandered through the wreckage of their homes, their faces blank with shock. Children clung to their parents, some crying, others too stunned to make a sound. Elderly residents sat in the shade of broken walls, exhaustion written across their faces. "We lost everything," a local man told them, his voice trembling. "The storm took our boats, our homes, our livelihoods." Shaquille walked through the village, his towering frame casting long shadows in the morning light. Every step revealed more destruction. A child's toy half buried in mud, a family photo soaked beyond recognition, a fishing net tangled in the branches of a fallen tree. The devastation was complete, touching every corner of the small island community. What was meant to be a luxury vacation had become a stark reminder of nature's power and human vulnerability. As Shaquille watched rescue workers begin their slow trek across the damaged landscape, something shifted inside him. This wasn't just another unfortunate event to witness, it was a call to action. Near the remains of what was once a small fishing shop, Shaquille met the Chen family. Mrs. Chen sat on a broken wooden bench, holding a photo frame with cracked glass. Her husband stood beside her, one hand on her shoulder, his weather-worn face lined with worry. "This was our home for 3 generations," Mrs. Chen said softly, her fingers tracing the damaged frame. "The shop, our boat, our savings, everything gone in one night. Now, we don't even know how to feed our children tomorrow." Mr. Chen looked out at the sea, his voice barely a whisper. "We've survived storms before, but this..." He shook his head. "This time is different. We keep waiting for help, but the days pass, and no one comes." A small movement caught Shaquille's attention. A young boy emerged from behind the Chens, his bright eyes standing out against the grim backdrop. Despite the devastation around him, there was a spark of life in his gaze that seemed undefeated. "I'm Kimo," the boy announced, looking up at Shaquille without fear. "Are you here to help us?" The directness of his question caught Shaquille off guard. Kimo continued, his words tumbling out eagerly. "We've been watching the sky and the sea every day. The adults said help would come, but no one has found us yet. Some people are sick and we're running out of clean water." Kimo pointed to different houses along the beach. "That's where my friend Mai lived. And over there, that's where old Mr. Lee kept his fishing nets. Everyone's still here, but nothing's the same anymore." The boy's simple words carried the weight of the entire village's suffering. Yet somehow, his eyes still held hope, a child's unwavering belief that things could get better. "We're not giving up, though," Kimo said firmly, standing a little straighter. "Mom says as long as we're alive, there's hope, but..." He hesitated, looking down at his feet. "It would be nice if someone remembered we're here." Kimo picked up a stick and drew lines in the sand, creating a simple picture. "See, Mr. Shaq, if we had a bridge to the mainland," he traced another line, "no one would be stuck here when storms come. No one would have to suffer like this." His simple words hit Shaquille like a physical force. In the child's innocent suggestion, he heard an echo of his own past struggles. "If we had a bridge..." The words hung in the air as memories flooded back to Shaquille. He remembered being 8 years old, watching his mother count pennies at the kitchen table, trying to make ends meet. The empty refrigerator, the cold winters, the times when help seemed so far away. "You know what, Kimo?" Shaquille knelt down beside the boy, his voice gentle. "Sometimes, a bridge isn't just something you can walk across. Sometimes, it's about connecting people who need help with those who can give it." The memories kept coming. He remembered the community center that had given him a safe place to play basketball, the neighbors who had shared what little they had, the teachers who had believed in him when others didn't. Kimo looked up at him, confusion clear in his young face. "But how can we build that kind of bridge?" Shakir stood up slowly, his mind already racing with possibilities. He looked out at the damaged boats in the harbor, then back at the village where people struggled to rebuild their lives. Something was taking shape in his thoughts. Not just a temporary solution, but a way to create lasting change. "We don't just need one bridge, Chemo," he said finally, his voice firm with conviction. "We need a way to reach every island, every coastal village that gets cut off when disaster strikes." The boy's simple wisdom had awakened something in Shaquille, a mission that would combine the resources he had with the understanding he'd gained through his own struggles. He knew what it felt like to need help, and now he had the power to provide it. Back in his city apartment, Shaquille couldn't shake the images from the island. Every night, they played through his mind like a relentless slideshow. The Chen family's lost home, the villagers' tired faces, Chemo's hopeful eyes. He stood by his window, looking out at the glittering city lights. Everything here seemed so normal, so secure. But he knew better now. Just a few hundred miles away, people were still struggling to survive. "How are you holding up?" Mark asked during their morning coffee meetup. "You've been quiet since we got back." Shaquille stared into his untouched coffee. "I keep seeing their faces, Mark. Every time I close my eyes, I see those people. I hear Chemo's voice." The morning news played quietly in the background, reporting another storm forming in the Pacific. Shaquille's hands tightened around his cup. "You know what bothers me most?" he continued, his voice growing stronger. "We all feel bad when we see disaster stories. We shake our heads, maybe donate a little money, but then we move on. Those people can't move on." He stood up suddenly, startling a few nearby customers. "I'm done just feeling sorry. Done with just hoping someone else will fix things." Mark watched his friend pace, recognizing the look of determination he'd seen so many times before. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking it's time to do something real," Shaquille said, his voice firm. "Something that actually makes a difference. Not just temporary aid, a permanent solution." He pulled out his phone, already scrolling through contacts. The images of destruction weren't just memories anymore. They were fuel for action. Each face he remembered pushed him forward. Each story he'd heard demanded a response. "We have the resources, the connections," he said, more to himself than to Mark. "It's time to use them for something bigger than ourselves." Back in his city apartment, Shaquille couldn't shake the images from the island. Every night they played through his mind like a relentless slideshow. The Chen family's lost home, the villagers' tired faces, Chemo's hopeful eyes. He stood by his window, looking out at the glittering city lights. Everything here seemed so normal, so secure. But he knew better now. Just a few hundred miles away, people were still struggling to survive. "How are you holding up?" Mark asked during their morning coffee meetup. "You've been quiet since we got back." Shaco stared into his untouched coffee. "I keep seeing their faces, Mark. Every time I close my eyes, I see those people. I hear Chemo's voice." The morning news played quietly in the background, reporting another storm forming in the Pacific. Shaquille's hands tightened around his cup. "You know what bothers me most?" he continued, his voice growing stronger. "We all feel bad when we see disaster stories. We shake our heads, maybe donate a little money, but then we move on. Those people can't move on." He stood up suddenly, startling a few nearby customers. "I'm done just feeling sorry. Done with just hoping someone else will fix things." Mark watched his friend pace, recognizing the look of determination he'd seen so many times before. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking it's time to do something real," Shaquille said, his voice firm. "Something that actually makes a difference, not just temporary aid, a permanent solution." He pulled out his phone, already scrolling through contacts. The images of destruction weren't just memories anymore, they were fuel for action. Each face he remembered pushed him forward. Each story he'd heard demanded a response. We have the resources, the connections, he said, more to himself than to Mark. It's time to use them for something bigger than ourselves. In the bright conference room, Shaquille stood before a group of potential investors, his presentation displayed on the screen behind him. The blueprint of the Hope Voyager filled the display, showing a ship unlike any other. "This isn't just another rescue vessel," Shaquille began, his voice steady with conviction. "The Hope Voyager will be a floating lifeline for coastal communities in crisis." He clicked through the slides, revealing each specialized feature. The cargo hold will be custom designed to carry enough food and supplies to support an entire village for weeks. We're not talking about small-scale relief. We're talking about real impact. The investors shifted in their seats as he continued. A fully equipped medical bay will provide basic healthcare services. Imagine bringing doctors and medical equipment directly to communities cut off from the mainland. And here's what makes us truly unique, he pointed to the next image. A state-of-the-art water purification system that can convert seawater into drinking water. No more waiting for water supplies to arrive. We make it right there where it's needed most. One investor raised his hand. "This all sounds impressive, Mr. O'Neill, but practically speaking..." Shaquille wasn't deterred. He revealed the final feature, a fleet of rescue drones. "These drones can reach places even our ship can't. They'll deliver emergency supplies and help us assess damage in hard-to-reach areas." The room fell silent. Then came the questions, each more skeptical than the last. The costs would be astronomical. It's too ambitious. The logistics are impossible. This is a fantasy, not a business plan. Shaquille stood firm, remembering Kimo's face, the Chen family's loss, the devastation he'd witnessed. "I'm not asking you to believe in just a ship," he said quietly. "I'm asking you to believe in hope, in our ability to do better." But as the meeting ended, it was clear from the polite smiles and quick exits that few shared his vision. They saw numbers on a page. He saw faces of people waiting for help that never came. Walking out of the building, Shaquille pulled out his phone. "Mark, give me the number for my investment team. If they won't fund it, we'll do it ourselves." The morning newspaper's headline felt like a slap in the face. Global Relief Organization calls Hope Voyager an impossible dream. Shaquille sat at his desk, scanning the article that had already gone viral. "With all due respect to Mr. O'Neill's intentions," the quote read, "this project is nothing more than a fantasy. Disaster relief requires practical solutions, not expensive floating dreams." Mark burst into the office, waving his phone. "Have you seen what they're saying? The whole humanitarian community is picking this apart." Shaquille looked up calmly. "Did you know people said the same thing when I wanted to build basketball courts in underprivileged neighborhoods? Too expensive, they said, not practical. But those courts changed lives." He stood up and walked to the window, watching the harbor in the distance. "You know what's really impractical? Leaving entire communities stranded after disasters. That's what we're trying to fix." "But they have a point about the cost," Mark said carefully. "We're talking about millions." Shaquille turned, a slight smile on his face. "Then it's a good thing I've been saving. Call the shipyard. Tell them we're moving forward." "You're funding this yourself?" Mark's eyes widened. "Every penny if I have to." Shaquille picked up Kimo's drawing from his desk. "Some things are worth more than money. This isn't about proving anyone wrong. It's about proving something possible." He pulled out his checkbook, his movements decisive. "Schedule a press conference, not to defend ourselves, but to share our vision. It's time people understood what we're really trying to build here." As Mark hurried out, Shaquille looked again at the harbor. Somewhere out there, people were waiting for help that never seemed to come. Not anymore. Sometimes the biggest dreams needed the strongest belief, and he had enough of both to make this work. "I can call it impossible," he said to himself, "but we're going to build it anyway." Shaquille sat in his office, reviewing stacks of resumes from around the world. He needed more than just qualified people. He needed dreamers who could turn impossible ideas into reality. The door opened, and a woman with silver-streaked hair walked in. Her weathered hands and confident stride spoke of decades at sea. "Tina Marshall," she introduced herself, though most people just call me Captain Tina. 20 years of naval engineering, Shaquille read from her file. "And you left your position at the largest shipbuilding company to come here?" Tina smiled, her eyes bright with determination. "I've built luxury cruise ships my whole career. It's time to build something that matters." Before they could continue, a young doctor burst into the office, slightly out of breath. "Sorry I'm late. Emergency at the clinic." Dr. Maya Chen's lab coat was wrinkled, but her energy filled the room. "Dr. Chen," Shaquille nodded. "Fresh out of residency, top of your class, and already running a free clinic?" "Please, just Maya," she said, settling into a chair. "And yes, because healthcare shouldn't be a luxury. When I heard about Hope Voyager, I knew this was my chance to reach people who never see a doctor." Tina turned to Maya with interest. "You understand we'll be sailing into disaster zones? No fancy equipment? Rough conditions?" Maya's face lit up. "That's exactly where we're needed most. I've been designing a mobile clinic setup that can work even without power." Shaquille watched them interact, seeing exactly what he'd hoped for, not just expertise, but passion. These weren't people looking for jobs. They were looking for purpose. "Ladies," he said, standing up, "want to see your new workplace? The ship arrives at the dock in an hour." Their eyes met, sharing a moment of understanding. This wasn't just another project. This was the beginning of something extraordinary. The renovation of Hope Voyager proved more challenging than anyone expected. Each day brought new problems that tested the team's resolve. "The water purification system keeps failing," Tina reported one morning, her face streaked with grease. "We fix one leak, another appears. It's like trying to solve a puzzle that keeps changing." Money was tight too. The costs mounted with every repair, every upgrade, every setback. Shaquille found himself selling investments he'd planned to keep, but he never complained. Each check he wrote was an investment in hope. "The medical bay's equipment needs special power circuits," Maya added to their growing list of challenges. "The standard setup won't work in rough seas." But despite the obstacles, the team refused to give up. They worked through nights, skipped weekends, and poured their hearts into every detail. When the funds ran low, they found creative solutions. When problems seemed impossible, they invented new ways forward. Finally, after 6 grueling months, Hope Voyager was ready. The ship gleamed in the morning sun, no longer just a dream on paper, but a real vessel of hope. Launch day arrived with clear skies and calm seas. The dock buzzed with activity as the crew made final preparations. Reporters gathered, curious to see if the impossible dream would actually sail. "All systems check complete," Tina called from the bridge. "We're ready, Captain." Maya emerged from below deck, her medical bay finally organized to perfection. "Clinic is stocked and secure. We can handle anything now." Shaquille stood at the bow, watching the sunrise paint the sky in brilliant colors. The gentle waves lapped against the hull, like nature itself welcoming their mission. He thought about all the doubters, all the obstacles, all the moments when giving up would have been easier. "This is just the beginning," he said softly, his hand resting on the ship's railing. "Today we prove that hope isn't just a word. It's a force strong enough to move mountains. Or, in our case, sail oceans." As the engines hummed to life and Hope Voyager began moving away from the dock, Shaquille felt a deep sense of purpose settle over him. They weren't just launching a ship, they were launching a message to the world. No community would be forgotten. No cry for help would go unanswered. The morning headlines hit Shaquille's desk like stones. Hope Voyager, a millionaire's vanity project, one newspaper declared. Relief organizations question O'Neill's expertise, another proclaimed. Each article seemed more critical than the last. Laura walked into his office, her face tight with concern. The International Aid Foundation just released another statement. They're questioning our ability to handle disaster relief. Shaquille picked up the nearest paper, reading aloud. While Mr. O'Neill's basketball achievements are impressive, disaster relief requires more than celebrity status. They really know how to hurt a guy, don't they? He tried to smile, but the weight of public criticism was starting to wear on him. The phone hadn't stopped ringing with reporters asking for comments, each interview feeling more like an interrogation. The permit applications are stuck in bureaucracy, Laura added, checking her tablet. The Maritime Safety Board wants additional documentation, environmental impact studies, crew certification reviews, everything. How long? Shaquille asked, already knowing he wouldn't like the answer. 3 months minimum, maybe more. Laura hesitated. And Shaq, Global Tech called. They're pulling their funding commitment. The news hit hard. Global Tech had been their largest potential investor. Their support crucial for the specialized medical equipment they'd planned to install. Any reason given? His voice remained steady, though his hands gripped the armrest tighter. The usual, too risky, untested concept. They suggest we start smaller. Laura's frustration was evident in her tone. Shaquille stood and walked to the window. Below, construction on the Hope Voyager continued, the workers like tiny figures moving across her hull. The ship was only half finished, but already beautiful in her potential. You know, it's funny, he said quietly. When I started playing basketball, they said I was too tall, too different, wouldn't fit the style of play. He turned back to Laura. Being different isn't the problem. It's the solution. His phone buzzed, another investor backing out. The message was polite but clear. They couldn't justify supporting such an unconventional project. They want us to fail, he continued, his voice growing stronger. The traditional organizations feel threatened. The bureaucrats don't understand what we're trying to do. And the investors? He shook his head. They're looking for safe bets. But safe bets don't change the world. Laura watched him carefully. What do you want to do? Shaquille picked up Kimo's drawing from his desk, the child's vision of hope still clear and pure. We keep building. Every permit they want, we'll file it. Every question they ask, we'll answer it. Every investor that leaves, he reached for his checkbook, we'll find a way. It's going to be harder without corporate backing, Laura warned. Good things usually are. Shaquille's smile returned, genuine this time. Send out a press release. Tell them Hope Voyager isn't just a project, it's a promise. And we intend to keep it. As Laura left, Shaquille looked again at the ship below. The critics could write their articles, the bureaucrats could demand their papers, the investors could keep their money. None of that changed the truth. Somewhere out there, people needed help. And Hope Voyager would be ready to answer that call, no matter how long it took. The team gathered in the ship's unfinished mess hall, spirits low after another day of setbacks, paint cans and tools scattered around them, evidence of their ongoing struggle to complete the Hope Voyager. I want to tell you about someone, Shaquille began, pulling out his phone. He showed them a photo of Kimo, standing on the beach of his devastated island. This boy changed everything for me. The crew leaned in as Shaquille shared Chemo's story, the destroyed village, the desperate wait for help, and the simple wisdom in the child's words about building bridges. He didn't just see problems, Shaquille explained, his voice soft but passionate. He saw solutions. When we felt helpless, he still had hope. Tina wiped a smudge of grease from her cheek. How old is he? 10. And he taught me more about courage than most adults I know. The next morning, something unexpected happened. A major newspaper ran a feature story, Hope Voyager, a new vision for disaster relief. The article detailed their mission, complete with interviews from coastal communities supporting the project. Sometimes the craziest ideas are exactly what we need, Laura read from the article. O'Neill's project may be unconventional, but it addresses a critical gap in disaster response. The story spread quickly. Social media lit up with messages of support. Local fishermen began stopping by the shipyard, offering their knowledge of coastal waters. Children sent drawings of the Hope Voyager, each one reminding the team of Chemo. "Look at this," Dr. Maya called out, checking her tablet. 3 coastal towns have written letters supporting our permit applications. They're calling Hope Voyager a floating lighthouse of hope. Shaquille smiled, touching the ship's hull. The metal was cool under his fingers, but he could feel the warmth of renewed purpose in his heart. One story had changed everything, not just Chemo's, but their own story of persistence and belief. Shaquille stood at the center of the ship's bridge, surrounded by his dedicated team. The morning light streamed through the windows, illuminating their determined faces. "Listen up, everyone," he began, his voice steady and strong. "We've heard all the doubts, all the criticism. But words don't build ships. Actions do." Tina nodded from her station, her hands covered in engine grease. Dr. Maya looked up from her medical inventory lists, while Laura paused her permit paperwork. "We can spend our time defending ourselves," Shaquille continued, "or we can prove them wrong with results. I choose results. Who's with me?" The response was immediate. Tina grabbed her tools, a new energy in her movements. "The engine room needs rewiring. I'll have it done by sunset." "I'll finish setting up the emergency medical protocols," Dr. Maya added, determination clear in her voice. "We'll be ready for anything." The team dispersed, each member attacking their tasks with renewed purpose. Days blended into nights as they worked tirelessly. When one person grew tired, another stepped in. When problems arose, they solved them together. Laura organized the permits into perfect order. The engineering team fine-tuned every system. The medical staff stocked and restocked supplies. Even the kitchen crew prepared for their role in future relief missions. Small victories added up. The water purification system passed its final test. The drone launch pad was completed ahead of schedule. Each success strengthened their resolve. "We're not just building a ship," Shaquille told them one evening as they shared a quick dinner on deck. "We're building proof that hope can take physical form." The team's response was simple. They worked even harder. Their unity became their strength, their shared purpose driving them forward. Every bolt tightened, every system checked, every detail perfected was their answer to the critics. The horizon beckoned, promising both challenges and opportunities. But now they were ready, united in their determination to show the world what hope could achieve. Tina watched skeptically as Shaquille climbed down into the engine room, wearing old jeans and a work shirt. His large frame seemed out of place among the maze of pipes and machinery. "No offense, Mr. O'Neill, but this isn't a basketball court," she said, crossing her arms. "These systems are complex. One wrong move could set us back weeks." "I know," he finished, picking up a wrench. "So teach me. I'm here to learn." Tina raised an eyebrow but began explaining the water filtration system. To her surprise, Shaquille asked intelligent questions and took careful notes. Day after day, he showed up in the engine room. His hands grew calloused from working with tools. His designer clothes were replaced by worn work gear stained with grease and paint. "Hand me that socket wrench," Shaquille called from under a pump one afternoon. Tina found herself smiling as she passed it to him. "You know," she admitted, "I thought you'd just be the guy who signs the checks. Most leaders don't get their hands dirty." Shaquille emerged, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Leaders should know every part of their mission. Besides," he grinned, "I've never been afraid of hard work." One night, as they tackled a particularly stubborn valve problem, Tina watched him work. His dedication was evident in every careful movement, every patient attempt to solve the issue. "I was wrong about you," she said quietly. "This isn't just a project for you, is it?" Shaquille paused, looking at the plans spread out before them. "Every part of this ship matters. Every person working on it matters. We succeed together or not at all." Tina nodded, a new respect in her eyes. The doubt she'd harbored had been replaced by something stronger, belief in their mission and the man leading it. The makeshift classroom in the ship's medical bay buzzed with activity. Dr. Maya stood before a group of volunteers, demonstrating basic first aid techniques on a practice dummy. "Remember, in disaster zones, we won't have fancy equipment," she explained, wrapping a bandage with practiced ease. "These simple skills can save lives." The volunteers, a mix of local medical students and community members, watched intently. Their dedication showed in their careful note-taking and focused questions. "Now, let's practice wound cleaning," Dr. Maya continued, moving between groups. "Imagine you're working with limited water supplies. Every drop counts." Meanwhile, in the ship's design room, Tina spread out revised blueprints across the table. The engineering team huddled around, pointing out areas for improvement. "If we adjust the water filtration system here," one engineer suggested, marking the plans, "we can increase output by 30%. Another team member stepped forward. "The drone launch pad needs better stabilization for rough weather. I have some ideas." The constant refinements transformed the Hope Voyager day by day. Each improvement made the ship more efficient, more capable of its mission. Back in the medical bay, Dr. Maya watched her trainees practice emergency procedures. Their skills were improving rapidly, their movements becoming more confident. "In the field, you'll face challenges we can't predict," she told them. "But remember, your knowledge and compassion are powerful tools." The ship was becoming more than just a vessel. It was a floating school, a laboratory of innovation, and a testament to human determination. Each person aboard contributed their expertise, making the Hope Voyager stronger and better prepared for the challenges ahead. The alarm blared through the ship at midnight, jolting everyone awake. Red warning lights flashed in the engine room as steam hissed from the water filtration system. "The main pump's failing," Tina shouted over the noise. "Pressure's rising to critical levels." Shaquille rushed in, still wearing his sleep clothes. "What do you need?" "We need to shut it down before it damages the whole system," she replied, frantically checking gauges. "But the emergency release valve is jammed." Without hesitation, Shaquille grabbed tools and joined the engineering team. Water sprayed around them as they worked to contain the crisis. The heat was intense, but no one backed away. "Hold this steady," Shaquille instructed, positioning himself under the main pipeline. His large hands gripped the wrench tightly as he applied pressure to the stuck valve. Hours passed as they worked. Morning light began filtering through the portholes, revealing exhausted faces and soaked clothes. But no one left their post. "Almost there," Tina muttered, making adjustments to the control panel. "Just need to bypass the damaged section." Finally, the system stabilized. The warning lights stopped flashing, and the terrible hissing ceased. The team slumped against the walls, relieved but drained. "Good work, everyone," Shaquille said, wiping sweat from his face. "This is what teamwork looks like." Tina looked at him with newfound respect. "You didn't have to stay down here all night." "Yes, I did," he replied simply. "We're in this together." The crisis had tested them, but it had also strengthened their bonds. They weren't just colleagues anymore. They were a team that could face any challenge together. The Hope Voyager gleamed in the morning sun, her fresh paint catching the light. Every system had been tested, every safety check completed. She was finally ready for her first mission. Shaquille walked the decks one last time, taking in all the details. The medical bay was fully stocked, its equipment secure. The water filtration system hummed smoothly. The drone launch pad stood ready for action. Each area held memories of the challenges they'd overcome together. He remembered Tina's late nights in the engine room, Dr. Maya's careful organization of medical supplies, and countless moments of teamwork that had brought them here. "Final checks are complete," Tina reported, pride evident in her voice. "She's ready, Captain." Dr. Maya emerged from below deck, her clipboard in hand. "Medical bay is fully prepared. We can handle anything now." The crew gathered on the main deck, their faces showing a mixture of excitement and determination. These weren't the same people who had started this journey months ago. They had grown stronger, more confident, more united. "Look at how far we've come," Shaquille said, addressing the team. "Everyone said this was impossible, but here we are, ready to prove them wrong." Laura stepped forward, holding up her tablet. "Weather reports are good. We have clearance to depart." Shaquille looked at each face in the crowd. He saw not just crew members, but believers who had given everything to make this dream real. Their unity was their greatest strength. "Here, tomorrow, we start our real work," he announced. "But today, I want you all to know something. You've already created a miracle. Not just in building this ship, but in showing what people can achieve when they believe in something bigger than themselves." The crew's response was a cheer that echoed across the water. The Hope Voyager wasn't just ready for her mission. She was ready to make history. The Hope Voyager cut through calm waters, its engines humming steadily as they headed toward Aurora Island. Reports had painted a grim picture. The small community had been devastated by a recent typhoon, leaving hundreds without homes, food, or clean water. "ETA 6 hours, Tina announced from the bridge, studying the navigation screens. "If we maintain current speed." Laura burst into the bridge, her face tense. "Shaq, we've got a problem." She held up her tablet, showing weather radar images. "A new storm system just formed. It's directly in our path." Shaquille studied the swirling pattern on the screen. The storm was growing rapidly, its edges already touching their planned route. "How bad?" he asked quietly. "Category 3, expected to strengthen," Laura replied. "We have maybe 2 hours before it crosses our path." Shaquille pressed the ship-wide intercom button. "All senior staff to the conference room, immediately." Minutes later, the team gathered around the large table. The room was silent, except for the gentle rocking of the ship and the hum of engines below. "Here's our situation," Shaquille began, bringing up the weather maps. "Aurora Island needs us, but this storm stands between us and them." Dr. Maya leaned forward. "What are our options?" "We can turn back," Tina said, pointing to the radar. "Wait for the storm to pass. It's the safe choice." "But that means leaving those people without help for at least another week," Laura added. "They've already been waiting too long." The tension in the room was palpable. Everyone understood the stakes. Their first mission could end before it truly began. "The ship can handle rough seas," Tina admitted, "but we've never tested her in actual storm conditions." Dr. Maya touched the medical supplies list on her tablet. "My team is ready for whatever comes. But I need to know, can we actually help people if we're damaged ourselves?" Shackle stood at the head of the table, looking at each face in turn. These people had put their trust in him, in this mission. Their lives would be at risk if they continued. "I won't make this decision alone," he said finally. "This is about all of us. We need to decide together." The room fell silent as everyone considered the choice before them. Outside, the sky was beginning to darken, the first distant signs of the approaching storm visible on the horizon. The weight of leadership had never felt heavier on Shaquille's shoulders. But as he looked at his team, he saw not fear but determination. They had built this ship for exactly this purpose, to reach those who had no one else to turn to. The moment of decision had arrived, and with it, the true test of everything they believed in. The conference room erupted with conflicting voices. Half the team argued for caution, while others insisted on pressing forward. "We can't risk everything on our first mission," one engineer protested. "The ship isn't battle-tested yet." "Those people have been waiting for days," Dr. Maya countered. "Every hour we delay could cost lives." Tina stood at the weather display, her expression grim. "The ship can take it, but there's no margin for error. One mistake and—" Laura interrupted. "Think about Chemo's Island. How many communities like that are waiting right now, hoping someone will come?" The debate grew more heated until Shaquille raised his hand for silence. The room quieted immediately. "I understand everyone's concerns," he said softly. "But let me ask you something. If we turn back now, what message does that send? That we only help when it's easy?" He walked to the window, watching the darkening sky. "If we turn back, we're not just delaying aid, we're taking away their hope. They know we're coming. They're waiting for us." The team exchanged glances as his words sank in. "I believe in this ship," Shaquille continued, "but more importantly, I believe in us. We built her for exactly this purpose." Before anyone could respond, the ship lurched violently. The storm had arrived faster than predicted. Alarms blared throughout the vessel. "All hands brace for impact," Tina shouted into the intercom. The Hope Voyager pitched and rolled as massive waves struck her hull. Equipment crashed to the floor. In the medical bay, supplies tumbled from shelves despite their careful securing. "Water filtration system failing," came a desperate call from engineering. "Pressure dropping across all decks." The ship groaned under the assault of wind and waves. Rain lashed the windows with such force it sounded like gravel hitting glass. Lightning illuminated the chaos in brilliant flashes. Shaquille grabbed the intercom. "Everyone to emergency stations. This is what we trained for." The vessel twisted in another massive wave, sending people stumbling against walls. But in the midst of the chaos, something remarkable happened. The team moved with purpose, each person focusing on their assigned tasks, despite the danger. They weren't just surviving the storm, they were fighting it. Together. A crash echoed from the engine room, followed by a scream of pain. Tina had been trying to stabilize the main engine when a violent wave threw her against the machinery. "Tina's down," someone shouted over the intercom. "We need medical help." Dr. Maya grabbed her emergency kit and fought her way through the rolling ship. The engine room was filled with steam and the smell of hot metal. She found Tina sprawled on the floor, clutching her bleeding arm. "Hold still," Dr. Maya ordered, bracing herself against a pipe as the ship lurched. "This isn't exactly an ideal surgery room, but we'll make it work." Above them, Shaquille and the remaining crew battled to keep the Hope Voyager on course. Teams of engineers worked in shifts, manually operating systems that had failed in the storm. "Another wave coming," someone shouted. "Brace!" The ship rose and fell with each massive swell. Equipment rattled in its mountings. But nobody stopped working. They passed tools, monitored gauges, and fought the storm with everything they had. "The rescue drone," Laura's voice cut through the chaos. "It broke free from its moorings." Through the spray-covered windows, they watched helplessly as their primary survey drone, crucial for assessing damage on the island, was swept overboard and crushed by the waves. "We needed that drone to map the disaster zone," Laura said, despair in her voice. "How will we know where to send aid first?" Shaquille's mind raced. Then he remembered something from his basketball days. Sometimes the best plays weren't in the playbook. "Get me the maintenance crew," he ordered, "and all the spare cameras we have." The team gathered quickly, holding onto railings as the ship swayed. "We'll build our own survey system," Shaquille explained. "Mount cameras on poles. When we reach the island, we'll extend them from the ship's sides. Old school, but it'll work." The crew immediately began repurposing equipment, their hands steady despite the storm's fury. It wasn't the perfect solution, but it was a solution. And right now, that's what mattered. Through it all, Dr. Maya continued treating Tina in the engine room, using her body to shield her patient from falling debris. The Hope Voyager might be wounded, but her crew's spirit remained unbroken. The storm finally began to weaken as dawn broke over the horizon. Exhausted crew members watched as the angry waves gradually calmed and the wind lost its fury. Through the clearing clouds, they caught their first glimpse of Aurora Island. "We made it," Laura whispered, her voice hoarse from shouting orders through the night. "We actually made it." The rising sun revealed the extent of the island's devastation. Fallen trees, damaged buildings, and debris scattered everywhere. But something else caught their attention. People were gathering on the beach, pointing at the approaching ship. "They've spotted us," Dr. Maya said, supporting a bandaged Tina by the rail. Through their binoculars, they could see the crowd growing larger. As the Hope Voyager drew closer, they heard shouts of joy carrying across the water. Some people fell to their knees, overcome with emotion. Others hugged each other, tears streaming down their faces. "Look at their faces," Shaquille said softly. "This is why we didn't turn back." The ship's makeshift survey system, cobbled together during the storm, began capturing images of the damage. But it also captured something else: the transformation of despair into hope as the islanders realized help had finally arrived. A small fishing boat approached, carrying local officials who would guide them to the dock. The man at the helm was crying openly, waving both arms in welcome. As they carefully maneuvered toward the pier, Shaquille spotted a familiar figure running along the shoreline, keeping pace with the ship. It was Chemo, his small legs pumping furiously as he raced toward the dock. The moment the gangway touched the pier, Chemo bounded up, tears and smiles mixing on his face. He threw himself at Shaquille, wrapping his arms as far as they would go around the big man's waist. "You came back," Chemo sobbed into Shaquille's shirt. "Everyone said no one would come, but you did. You didn't forget us." Shaquille knelt down to the boy's level, his own eyes wet with tears. "We'll never forget you, Chemo. That's a promise." The crew watched this reunion, many wiping away their own tears. The night's battle against the storm, their injuries and fears, all seemed worth it for this moment. They had brought more than supplies to this island. They had delivered hope itself. Sarah, the ship's young communications officer, sat in her small cabin, reviewing the footage on her camera. Her hands still trembled slightly from the night's events. The video she'd captured during the storm was raw and unfiltered. The massive waves, the crew's desperate fight to keep the ship stable, and their eventual triumph. "People need to see this," she whispered to herself, connecting her camera to her laptop. "They need to know what really happened out there." The footage began with calm seas, then showed the storm's rapid approach. The camera shook as waves crashed against the ship. Lightning flashes illuminated faces of crew members working frantically to save their vessel. Dr. Maya treating Tina's injuries, engineers fighting to maintain power, and Shaquille's steady leadership throughout the crisis. It was all there. Sarah added a simple caption: "This is Hope Voyager's first mission. They said we couldn't do it. Watch what happened." Her finger hovered over the upload button for just a moment before pressing it. Within hours, the video began to spread. First hundreds, then thousands of views. People shared it with comments of amazement and support. These people are heroes. Bai risked everything to help others. This is what real courage looks like. By morning, the video had gone viral. News stations picked it up, playing clips during their broadcasts. Social media exploded with reactions. Laura burst into Shaquille's office, her eyes wide with excitement. "Shaq, you need to see this. The video of our mission. It's everywhere. Over 2 million views already." Shaquille looked up from his desk where he'd been reviewing supply lists. "What video?" Laura turned her tablet toward him, showing the footage. "Sarah recorded everything. Look at the comments. People are calling Hope Voyager a beacon of real hope." As they watched, more notifications kept appearing. The view count climbed higher. Each share spread their story further, inspiring others with their determination and courage. "Maybe now they'll understand," Shaquille said softly, watching his crew's bravery play out on screen. "This isn't just about one ship or one mission. It's about showing what's possible when people refuse to give up." The simple video had done what countless meetings and presentations couldn't. It had shown the world the true heart of Hope Voyager's mission. The morning paper sat on Shaquille's desk, its headline bold and clear: "Ocean's Lighthouse, How Shaquille O'Neal is Changing Disaster Relief." The article featured a striking photo of the Hope Voyager cutting through stormy waters, its lights piercing the darkness. "Have you seen this yet?" Laura asked, entering with her morning coffee. "It's not just local anymore. International media is picking up the story." Shaquille picked up the paper, reading aloud. "When most ships turn back from storms, Hope Voyager sails forward. Like a lighthouse in the darkest night, Shaquille O'Neal and his crew bring hope to forgotten communities." "The Times wants to do a full feature," Laura continued, checking her phone. "They're sending a reporter to spend a week with us, document everything we do." The reporter, Emma Chen, arrived the next day. She followed the crew, watching their daily routines and listening to their stories. Her notebook filled with details: the late-night emergency drills, the careful loading of supplies, the constant radio communications with coastal communities. "I've covered disaster relief for 15 years, Emma told Shaquille during their interview, "but I've never seen anything like this." Her article, published a week later, painted a vivid picture of life aboard Hope Voyager. It described the ship's innovative technology, but focused more on the people, their dedication, their sacrifices, their unwavering commitment to helping others. "What drives you?" she had asked Shaquille. "The faces of people when they see our ship approaching," he'd replied simply. "That moment when despair turns to hope. That's what keeps us going." The story spread quickly through international media. Headlines appeared in different languages, all carrying the same message: something remarkable was happening on the seas. Humanitarian organizations that had once criticized the project now reached out to learn more. Their messages filled Laura's inbox. "We'd like to understand your emergency response protocols. Can we send observers to study your methods? Would you consider partnering with us?" "Funny how things change," Laura remarked, showing Shaquille the messages. "Remember when they called this impossible?" Shaquille smiled, watching his crew prepare for their next mission. "Sometimes you have to light the way for others to see what's possible." The media attention had done more than validate their work. It had opened eyes and hearts to a new way of thinking about disaster relief. Hope Voyager wasn't just a ship anymore. It was becoming a symbol of innovation and compassion in action. The conference room buzzed with excitement as Laura rushed in, clutching her tablet. "Shaq, you won't believe this. Global Relief Foundation wants to fund 5 more ships like Hope Voyager, and they're not the only ones." Shaquille looked up from his desk, his eyes widening as Laura showed him the list of potential donors: major corporations, international foundations, even private philanthropists, all wanting to support the project. "They're calling it the Fleet of Hope," Laura explained. "They want to create a network of rescue ships around the world." The next morning, reporters filled the ship's main deck. Cameras flashed as Shaquille stepped up to the podium, the Hope Voyager's gleaming hull behind him. 6 months ago, many people called this project impossible, he began, his voice carrying across the crowd. They said one ship couldn't make a difference, that we were dreamers. He paused, looking at his crew standing proudly nearby. And you know what? They were right about one thing. We are dreamers. But dreams are what push us forward. A reporter raised her hand. What was the hardest part of the journey? Shaquille smiled, remembering the long nights and countless obstacles. The hardest part wasn't the storms or the technical challenges. It was fighting doubt, our own and others. And the most rewarding moment, another journalist asked? That's easy, Shaquille replied. It's when we reach a community that's lost hope, and we show them they're not forgotten, that someone cares enough to brave any storm to help them. He shared stories from their missions, the families they'd helped, the lives they'd saved, the communities they'd restored. Each tale painted a picture of what was possible when people refused to give up. Today, we're announcing a new chapter, Shaquille concluded. With our partners, we'll build more ships, train more crews, reach more people. Because hope isn't just a word, it's an action. And it's time for all of us to act. The applause was thunderous. Camera flashes lit up the deck as reporters rushed forward with more questions. But Shaquille's eyes were on his crew, the people who had believed in the dream from the beginning. This wasn't just a press conference, it was a turning point. Hope Voyager was about to become something bigger than anyone had imagined. As cameras continued to flash, Shaquille raised his hand for silence. His next words would come straight from his heart. People often talk about hope like it's a luxury, he said, his deep voice carrying across the deck. Something nice to have when times are good. But that's not what hope is. He stepped away from the podium, moving closer to the crowd. Hope isn't a luxury. It's as essential as the air we breathe. It's what makes us act when everything seems impossible. Put the faith in people like Warren Jeffers, and even in my father's way, the greatest leader ever. The room fell silent, reporters' pens hovering over notebooks. Behind Shaquille, his crew nodded in agreement, knowing the truth in his words. That evening, as the press conference footage played on news channels worldwide, something remarkable began to happen. The Hope Voyager's website crashed from too many visitors. Laura's phone wouldn't stop buzzing with notifications. "Shaq," she called out, rushing into his office. "You need to see this. We've got over 10,000 volunteer applications since your speech, and they're still coming in." The applications told their own stories. A retired nurse from Seattle, "I want to help." A young engineer from Tokyo, "Let me be part of this mission." A fisherman from Greece, "I know these waters, use my experience." The ship's inbox filled with messages from every corner of the world. Students, doctors, sailors, teachers, all wanting to join the cause. "Look at this one," Laura said, reading from her screen. "A grandmother from Florida sold her jewelry to buy a plane ticket. She says she's been a first aid instructor for 30 years. Shaquille walked to the window, watching the sunset paint the sky. "You know what this means, don't you? Hope isn't just spreading, it's turning into action." The volunteer coordination team worked around the clock, sorting applications and organizing training sessions. The ship's corridors buzzed with new energy as experienced crew members prepared to teach the newcomers. "We'll need to expand our training program," Dr. Maya suggested during the staff meeting. "These people aren't just offering their time, they're offering their hearts." Each new volunteer brought something unique: skills, knowledge, perspective. But they all shared one thing: the understanding that hope wasn't just a feeling. It was a call to action, and they were ready to answer. The morning meeting was interrupted by Laura's excited entrance. Her hands trembled as she held up an official letter. "The International Relief Foundation," she announced, her voice shaking. They're pledging $50 million for new ships and technology upgrades. Shaquille sat back in his chair, momentarily stunned. The amount was beyond anything they'd imagined possible. "There's more," Laura continued. "They want to implement our rescue systems as the new global standard for maritime disaster response." Tina leaned forward, her eyes bright with possibilities. "With that kind of funding, we could upgrade all our water filtration systems, maybe even develop new drone technology. And expand our medical facilities," Dr. Maya added. "We could have full surgical units on board." The news spread quickly. Within days, countries began reaching out, asking to create their own versions of Hope Voyager. Japan announced plans for a Pacific rescue fleet. Australia started developing coastal response ships based on their model. At the United Nations Humanitarian Conference, Hope Voyager was presented as a case study in innovative disaster relief. Videos of their missions played on giant screens as Shaquille addressed the gathered leaders. "One ship became a symbol," he said, his voice echoing through the hall. "But symbols have power. They show us what's possible." Back on board, the crew watched their impact spread across the globe. News channels showed groundbreaking ceremonies for new rescue ships in different countries. Local communities organized their own relief programs inspired by Hope Voyager's example. "Remember when we could barely get anyone to believe in us?" Laura asked, watching footage of a new rescue ship launching in Singapore. Shaquille smiled, thinking of their journey from skepticism to global recognition. Sometimes people just need to see it's possible, then hope spreads on its own. The original Hope Voyager continued its missions, but now it carried something more than supplies. It carried proof that compassion combined with innovation could change the world. One wave at a time. The Hope Voyager's horn echoed across the water as it approached the small island harbor. The sound drew people from their makeshift shelters, their faces lighting up at the sight of the massive ship. "Look, they've come," voices called out, spreading the news from house to house. Within minutes, hundreds of islanders rushed toward the dock, their feet kicking up sand as they ran. Children waved whatever they could find, torn shirts, broken branches, pieces of cloth. The elderly moved as quickly as they could, supported by younger family members. Everyone wanted to welcome their beacon of hope. As the ship's gangway lowered, the crowd surged forward. Their cheers filled the air, mixing with sounds of joyful crying. Some people fell to their knees, overcome with emotion. Among the crowd, the Chen family stood together, tears streaming down their faces. Mr. Chen held his wife close as she whispered, "I thought we were going to die here." The local doctor adapted personalized treatment to treat people. 3 days without food, he explained to Shaquille as the crew began unloading supplies. The storm took everything. Our house, our boat, our food storage, all gone. We were losing hope with each sunset. Mrs. Chen wiped her eyes, watching the crew distribute water and food packages. Last night, our youngest asked if we would ever eat again. I didn't know what to tell her. Then this morning, we saw your ship on the horizon." Their daughter, barely 6 years old, clutched a bottle of fresh water like it was the most precious thing in the world. Her eyes never left the Hope Voyager, as if afraid it might disappear. "When we saw your lights," Mr. Chen continued, his voice breaking, "it was like seeing the sunrise after the longest night. You brought more than supplies, you brought us back to life." Around them, similar scenes played out as families received aid packages, the air filled with thank yous in different languages, all carrying the same weight of gratitude. The Hope Voyager had arrived just in time, turning despair into joy with its presence. As Shaquille helped distribute supplies, an elderly woman approached him slowly. Her gray hair was windblown, and her clothes showed signs of the recent hardships, yet her eyes sparkled with life. Without warning, she wrapped her arms around him in a tight embrace. Despite his towering height, she held him as if he were her own son. Tears rolled down her weathered cheeks. Several times, her lips lifted to crosses. "You saved my family," she whispered, her voice trembling. "My grandchildren would not have survived another day without water. You are our angel." Shaquille gently returned her hug, feeling the strength in her fragile frame. Before he could respond, someone tugged at his shirt. He looked down to find Chemo, clutching a rolled piece of paper. "Mr. Shaq!" Chemo's eyes shone with excitement. "I made something for you. I worked on it all night." The boy carefully unrolled his artwork. It was a drawing of the Hope Voyager, rendered in bright colors. The ship's details were surprisingly accurate, from the medical bay windows to the drone launch pad. Waves of blue surrounded the vessel, and seabirds soared in the painted sky. At the bottom, in careful letters, Chemo had written, "One day, I will captain this ship." "See?" Chemo pointed to a small figure he'd drawn on the bridge. "That's me. When I grow up, I'm going to help people just like you do." Shaquille knelt down to Chemo's level, holding the drawing with care. "You've got the heart of a captain already, buddy." "Really?" Chemo's face lit up. "You think I could do it?" "I know you can," Shaquille replied, seeing his own childhood dreams reflected in the boy's hopeful eyes. "And when you're ready, we'll have a place for you right here on Hope Voyager." The elderly woman, still standing nearby, placed her hand on Chemo's shoulder, 2 generations connected by hope, looking toward a brighter future. The evening news played stories from the island across the globe. Cameras captured the elderly woman's tearful embrace with Shaquille, Chemo's determined smile, and countless other moments of pure gratitude. Through the whole data journal, Chemo saw the episode again and again, counting the moments where he was supposed to be there. "We had nothing left," one father told reporters, cradling his infant daughter. "No food, no clean water. Then we saw Hope Voyager on the horizon like a miracle." Social media filled with video clips of the island's children running alongside the crew, helping carry supplies. Their laughter and joy touched hearts worldwide. Dr. Maya sat in the ship's mess hall, watching these stories play on the small TV. "I've never felt so appreciated in my entire medical career," she said softly. Tina nodded, still wearing her work coverall stained with engine grease. "Did you see how they insisted on helping us repair the water system? They've lost everything, but still want to give back." The crew gathered around tables, sharing their own experiences from the day. Each had a story that moved them, a thank you note pressed into their hands, a child's drawing, a grandmother's blessing. "Remember the fishing net they gave us?" Laura asked. "Hand-woven from what little rope they had left. They said it was for good luck on our next journey." The net now hung in the ship's bridge, a reminder of the people they served. More than decoration, it represented their mission's true meaning. Shaquille watched his crew's faces as they shared these moments. The exhaustion from their hard work remained, but their eyes shone with renewed purpose. "You know what this means?" he asked them. "Every story shared is another light of hope spreading. Every grateful smile gives us strength for the next storm." The crew nodded in agreement. They weren't just delivering supplies anymore. They were carrying people's hopes, dreams, and trust. It was a responsibility they now embraced with even greater determination. "Tomorrow we sail for the next community," Shaquille announced. "And we'll bring the same hope there, because now we know this is exactly where we need to be." As the sun began to set, an old craftsman approached the crew gathered on deck. His hands, weathered by years of working with wood, held something wrapped in a piece of cloth. "Please," he said softly, unwrapping his gift. "I made these for you." Inside the cloth lay several wooden bracelets, each carved with intricate wave patterns. The wood was smooth and dark, polished to a gentle shine. "This is from our sacred tree," the craftsman explained. "It survived the storm when everything else fell. I carved these to remind you that you'll always have a home here." He placed a bracelet in each crew member's hand. The wood felt warm, alive with stories and gratitude. The waves, he pointed to the pattern, represent our connection. Like the ocean, it never ends. Shaquille studied his bracelet, noticed how it fit perfectly despite his large wrist. The old man had somehow known each person's size. "Circuit. I've been carving wood for 60 years, the craftsman said, but these are the most important pieces I've ever made." Later that night, alone in his cabin, Shaquille touched the wooden bracelet. His mind filled with images of all the communities still waiting for help. Islands marked by storms, villages cut off from aid. Now, he pulled out his laptop and began typing. Plans for new ships, ideas for expanded routes, notes about additional training programs. The words flowed as his commitment deepened. "This is just the beginning," he whispered to himself, feeling the smooth wood against his skin. "We need to reach more people, build more ships, train more crews." The bracelet seemed to warm with his resolve. It wasn't just jewelry, it was a promise to the craftsmen, to the island, to every community still waiting for hope to appear on their horizon. The ship's gentle rocking matched the rhythm of his typing as Shaquille worked through the night, planning how to bring hope to even more distant shores. Late one evening, Shaquille stood at his office window, watching rescue footage from their latest mission. Something had been nagging at his thoughts, a realization he couldn't shake. "Laura," he called to his assistant, "how many times have we returned to the same islands?" She checked her tablet. 3 communities have needed emergency aid twice this year alone. Shaquille nodded slowly. "We're helping people survive storms, but we're not helping them prepare for them." The next morning, he gathered his team in the conference room. Maps of coastal regions covered the walls, each marked with areas most frequently hit by disasters. Taller piles, containing almost everything people could live with, were spread across the table. "Emergency relief isn't enough," he explained, pointing to the patterns. "We need to help communities before storms hit." Dr. Maya leaned forward. "What are you suggesting?" "Preparation stations," Shaquille replied, unrolling a new set of blueprints. "Built-in strategic coastal locations, stocked with supplies, equipped with basic rescue gear." The plans showed sturdy buildings designed to withstand severe weather. Each would have storage rooms for food and water, medical supplies, and emergency equipment. "Like permanent lifeboats on land," Tina observed, studying the designs. "They're complex," Elspeth said. "Exactly," Shaquille smiled. "When storms come, people won't have to wait for us. Help will already be there." The team quickly caught his vision. Engineers suggested reinforced foundations. Dr. Maya recommended essential medical supplies. Laura identified priority locations based on historical data. "We'll teach local volunteers how to maintain the stations," Shaquille continued. "Train them in basic rescue operations. We call it the stair shot. It's like giving them their own small Hope Voyager," one crew member remarked. Construction began on the first station within weeks. The coastal community welcomed the project with open arms, offering local knowledge about weather patterns and safe building locations. "My children won't have to feel helpless anymore," a local father told Shaquille as they watched the foundation being laid. "Now we can face storms with confidence." The first station took shape, a solid building with rooms for supplies, training areas, and communication equipment. Solar panels and backup generators ensured power during emergencies. Water purification systems matched those on Hope Voyager. Altogether, the campsite seemed to be on point. "This isn't just a building," Shaquille told the gathered community at the opening ceremony. "It's your anchor of hope, your shield against nature's fury." As he cut the ribbon, children ran inside to explore. Their parents followed, amazed by the stockpiles of emergency supplies and rescue equipment. Now, Shaquille thought, watching families learn about their new safety center, we're not just rescuing people, we're empowering them to rescue themselves. Tina stood in the ship's engineering bay, her hands moving deftly across a complex digital display. Scattered around her were prototype water filtration components, each representing a potential breakthrough in disaster relief technology. "We can do better," she muttered, tracing a circuit diagram. Her team of young engineers watched intently, their notebooks filled with sketches and calculations. "Look here," Tina pointed to a schematic. "Traditional filters lose nearly 40% efficiency in saltwater conditions. We need something that adapts." Nearby, Dr. Maya was setting up her own training station. Local community members from various coastal regions gathered, their faces a mix of curiosity and determination. Some were fishermen, others were teachers, but all shared one goal: learning to save lives. First rule of emergency medical response, Maya demonstrated on a practice dummy, her movements precise and calm. Stabilization happens before transportation. End of section 83. Recorded by Arts Gorgeous. A young woman named Elena raised her hand. "What if we're completely isolated? No hospitals, no communication." Maya smiled. "Exactly the scenario we're preparing for." In a local school, a new curriculum was taking shape. Students between 10 and 16 were learning disaster preparedness through interactive modules. Maps showing evacuation routes hung on walls. Miniature models demonstrated building techniques resistant to storms and floods. Kimo, now a junior trainee with Hope Voyager, helped design some of these educational materials. His childhood experience had transformed into a mission of prevention and education. "See this section?" he would explain to younger students. "Knowing what to do before the disaster is as important as surviving during it." Tina's engineering team continued experimenting. Water samples from different oceans were tested, each filter prototype pushed to its limits. Efficiency wasn't just a number, it represented lives that could be saved. "We're not just building a filter," Tina told her team. "We're building hope." Dr. Maya's medical training sessions grew more sophisticated. They weren't just teaching first aid, but creating a network of community responders. Each participant learned not just how to treat wounds, but how to organize local rescue efforts. The school program expanded rapidly. Local governments began adopting their model, recognizing that education was the most powerful prevention tool. As the sun set over the Hope Voyager, Shaquille watched these developments with quiet pride. What had started as a rescue mission was becoming a comprehensive approach to community resilience. "We're changing the game," he said softly to Laura. "Not just responding to disasters, but preventing them." The morning sunlight caught the brass nameplate on Kimo's new Maritime Academy uniform. "Scholarship recipient," it read, a testament to a journey that began on a storm-ravaged island. Shaquille watched from the sidelines, a proud smile spreading across his face. Kimo stood straighter, his eyes bright with possibility. The boy who once drew pictures of hope was now living it. "Welcome aboard, future captain," Shaquille said, placing a gentle hand on Kimo's shoulder. Kimo beamed. "I won't let you down, Mr. Shaq." The scholarship was more than just education. It was a bridge between a challenging past and a promising future. Hope Voyager had found its youngest ambassador. In Geneva, international humanitarian conference rooms buzzed with excitement. Shaquille's presentation wasn't just a pitch. It was a vision of global cooperation. "We're not competing," he told representatives from various organizations. "We're collaborating." Maps spread across tables showed potential expansion routes. The Hope Voyager model could be adapted to different maritime environments, from the Pacific Islands to Caribbean hurricane zones. The helicopters sat on the surface of the water, hosing out resources for flight craft. The United Nations delegation leaned forward, A representative from the Red Cross nodded slowly. "This could change everything," she whispered. Flat stretch of silver beach, inside a warm seas of cloud. Funding commitments began to materialize. The World Health Organization proposed joint medical training programs. Environmental agencies saw opportunities for climate resilience research. Timo's scholarship was just the beginning. Scholarships for young people from disaster-prone regions were now being discussed. A new generation of humanitarian workers was taking shape. "Men's ship can start a movement," Shaquille told the assembled leaders. "But many ships can transform the world." Exit 1 rapidly assembled for move-out. Fight, fight, fight. As discussions continued, hope spread like waves across the conference room. Quiet, powerful, unstoppable. The screen lit up with a soft blue glow. The Hope Alert app was coming to life. Lines of code transformed into an intuitive interface designed to save lives. "Ow. Perfect," Laura murmured, watching the final test results. Satellite imagery, weather patterns, and local topography merged seamlessly into a single, user-friendly platform. Users could now receive personalized evacuation alerts. The app didn't just warn, it guided. Detailed maps showed safe routes. Emergency supply checklists appeared with each warning. Translation features ensured no community was left behind. In a small coastal village, a fisherman's phone buzzed. "Typhoon warning," the screen read. Detailed instructions followed. Exact evacuation times. Nearest shelters. Emergency contact numbers. At the United Nations Humanitarian Summit, Hope Voyager was more than a project. It was a global blueprint for disaster response. "This isn't just technology," Shaquille told assembled world leaders. "This is hope with a purpose." International organizations studied every detail of their model. The World Health Organization praised their comprehensive approach. Climate resilience experts saw a new paradigm of emergency preparation. They created protocols to be followed. "We're not just responding to disasters," Shaquille explained. "We're preventing them." Timo watched from the sidelines, his eyes bright with understanding. The boy who once drew pictures of rescue ships was now witnessing a global transformation. "Fixing on purpose," Timo said. Satellite feeds, mobile technology, community training, Hope Voyager was rewriting the rules of humanitarian aid. One alert, one ship, one community at a time. The harbor glowed with anticipation. Thousands gathered, their faces a tapestry of hope and gratitude. Hope Voyagers stood behind Shaquille, a silent testament to their incredible journey. Timo sat in the front row, his eyes never leaving the stage. Beside him, the Chen family watched with pride. Following a year ago, Shaquille began, his voice carrying across the crowd. "We were just a dream. Today, we are a movement." The audience leaned forward, hanging on every word. "Hope isn't something we wait for," he continued. "Hope is something we create." Ah! A gentle breeze carried his words, rustling flags and banners commemorating their missions. Volunteers from dozens of countries stood shoulder to shoulder, united by a single purpose. An elderly woman from the Chen family stepped forward, cradling a delicate bamboo lantern. Hand-woven, its intricate patterns told stories of survival and resilience. "You are the light that guided us," she said, her voice trembling. "When darkness surrounded us, you showed us the way," Lucia said. Shaquille accepted the lantern, his large hands gentle around the fragile gift. In that moment, the lantern represented more than a simple object. It was a symbol of transformation. It wasn't what Shaquille had ever expected when she had first produced the lantern, but she had wanted to prove herself to herself, and the way she had done it. Timo watched, his young face bright with inspiration. He saw not just a ceremony, but a future waiting to be shaped. The sun began to set, casting golden light across the gathered crowd. Hope Voyager's hull gleamed, a beacon of possibility against the evening sky. No one had said a negative word since the first voyage began. Emo stood tall on the deck, his maritime cadet uniform crisp and new. Where once he was a child watching hope arrive, now he was part of creating that hope. Next up was the ship's touring committee, who strolled around the deck, inherently suspicious. "Incoming storm system," Tina announced, her fingers dancing across the navigation screens. "Category 2, heading southeast." Shaquille watched Chemo carefully. The boy's eyes were focused, not with fear, but with determination. "Ready?" he asked. "Born ready," Chemo responded, a smile matching the one Shaquille remembered from their first meeting. Hope Voyager's engines hummed to life, radar screens lit up, tracking the approaching storm, rescue drones prepared for launch. Every system checked, double-checked, ready for whatever challenges approached. "This is where we make a difference," Shaquille said softly. Chemo nodded, his hands already moving to assist the crew. The boy who once drew pictures of rescue ships now helped guide one. His childhood dream had become his mission. Outside, dark clouds gathered, but inside Hope Voyager there was only light, the light of preparation, of courage, of hope waiting to be delivered. Latrell Ben Norman. Another journey was beginning. The first light of dawn painted the horizon in soft gold. Shaquille stood at the ship's railing, watching the world awaken. Hope Voyager beneath his feet felt alive, vibrating with purpose. "Why do we come back there?" she asked, her voice shrill with "We're ready," Laura said, joining him. Chemo appeared at their side, binoculars in hand. "Where are we going today?" he asked, his voice eager. Shaquille smiled. "Wherever hope is needed most," he laughed. He kept laughing as he moved from butt to breast, searching for one. The port was quiet, but anticipation hummed in the air. Crew members moved with practiced efficiency, supplies were secured, systems checked and double-checked. Hope Voyager's engines rumbled to life. Slowly, majestically, the ship began to move. Ropes were cast off. The first rays of sunlight glinted off her hull. On the dock, families waved. Volunteers watched with pride. This was more than a departure. It was a promise. And Chemo raised his hand, a salute to the horizon. Somewhere out there, communities were waiting for light, waiting for hope. The ship moved forward, cutting through morning mist. Another journey was beginning. Chapter 12.